Michael Kaskey-Blomain from 97.3 ESPN.com. And, Michael, a lot of bad performances, hideous and horrendous, I explained, for Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris. What word or phrase would you use to describe game number one for the 76ers? And do you think that we are more apt to see that type of performance again, or is this stuff easily fixable?
I think disappointing is probably the word that I would use the most, Mike. Obviously, they looked kind of sluggish at the end of the regular season, but I think a lot of us were just kind of chalk that up to them, almost looking forward, looking ahead to the postseason. And then to just come out like that at home, first game of the playoff, first game of the series, and just come out in such a disappointing manner, I think that's the most appropriate word. And, obviously, I think we certainly hope that they don't have a similar performance like that tonight. I think that they were all, adequately embarrassed and disappointed in themselves after the game. At least that's the vibe I got in the locker room and talking to those guys. So I do think that they know, that they obviously have to be better. And I think that, I expect them to be better, obviously.
I like that you said they felt embarrassed about it. I mean, at least it shows that they kind of cared that they came up with kind of a stinker. Jimmy Butler had said, hey, relax. There's a lot of things that we can fix here. Do you think that some of the issues on Saturday are easily fixable, or is their personnel not going to allow them to fix some of the problems they have against this particular Nets team?
I think some of the problems are definitely fixable, Mike. I mean, if you start with just 3-point shooting, the Sixers were 3 for 25. It's just from long distance. If they make, 3-4 more of those threes and just go 8 for 25, they might win the game. So similar with the free throw line, they were 29 out of 42 from the free throw line, which is, not great. You leave a lot of points on the board there. So just a couple small things like that, they could perform better, that could swing the series. That doesn't mean that there aren't concerns with the personnel as is, especially they were, badly outscored by the bench of the Clippers, which is one of the things that I was most concerned about, entering the series. Depth has been an issue for the Sixers all season, and it's been a strength for Brooklyn. They had the third highest scoring bench in the NBA during the regular season. A lot of guys that can come off of that bench and just give you points. And the Sixers just really don't have that. And that was, glaring in game one when you have, like you mentioned, the starters, 3 out of your 5 starters is really basically not showing up. When, you couple that with a bench that you can't really, when the guys struggle like that, you don't necessarily have guys that you can turn to come in and step up. And that's, that was magnified in that game one performance.
I know you don't like hearing him say they just make a couple extra threes.
No, I hate it. It drives me nuts.
That's what I was saying. They just shot very poorly. Poorly as they looked, or as poorly as coaches people thought they were, they make a couple threes, they win the game.
MKB, because me and Gil go back and forth, and he's always the rational one, but I hate his explanation of hate's a strong word, but I dislike his explanation of, listen, they just didn't make shots tonight. If they make shots, they win the game. I'm like, Mike, there's more to it than just making shots. There's a reason as to why they shot that way. Rhythm of the game, Ben Simmons, like pieces to that puzzle is my.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's not, as simple as saying that, and there is a lot of reasons why, those shots weren't necessarily falling. The offense looked, out of sync from the beginning. I remember there was one point when they started to rally in the midway through the third quarter. They had it down to double digits. I was thinking that, if they were able to walk away with this win, despite how poorly they played in that second and early in the third quarter, that, it could have been a positive moving forward, but instead it kind of went the other way. And I think that just leaves them, with a lot of questions. Obviously the offense needs to play better, but it falls somewhere in the middle of the panic that I think you see on social media and the reality of something being as simple as making more threes.
Agree.
It was, it's not often, at least it was the first time since this starting five has been together, that you see all three of those guys, meaning JJ, Tobias, and Ben, play that poorly. You hope, or at least assume, that's not going to be a regular occurrence. Maybe one of those guys, we've seen JJ struggle, we've seen Tobias go through some struggles, Ben's had, off games, but to have them all, combined at one time like that, obviously was just too much for that team to overcome. And you have to, it's an issue projecting past this series, definitely, but you have to at least think in the short term. I said right after the game, hopefully you have to expect that combination of players will at least step up, to make it more even, at least against this Nets team.
What do you think of Ben's play on Saturday? And two-part question here. And then looking forward to tonight. I think tonight is a borderline defining moment for Ben Simmons because he has a horrible performance on Saturday, just to be blunt about it. He comes out after the game and he essentially says, calls out the Philly fans for booing, which is literally all they're known for. And now tonight, he has a game at home with this team down 1-0. If he puts up another stinker and the Sixers go down 2-0, this could be like a snowball of negativity for Ben Simmons in particular. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of pressure on Ben tonight. There's going to be a lot of eyes on him, and rightfully so. I mean, obviously Joel is hampered. We can see that he's not at 100%. And Ben, as that second guy, this is an opportunity for him to step up. I think he was really in his own head in game one, which is something that he admitted himself after the game when he was talking to the media. I think he was overthinking it coming off of that, pretty disappointing playoff series against the Celtics last year, which, I gave him a lot of slack last year. He was a rookie in a, super competitive playoff series against a well-coached, experienced Celtics team. Now that's kind of passed him under his belt. He has that experience. I think he was in his head. I think, not that this makes or breaks his future in Philadelphia or anything like that. I'm not going that far, but I do agree that in terms of early career, this is a, very crucial game for Ben to kind of, see how he responds to that, negativity from the crowd and also bounces back from his poor play. I think he'll probably be a little bit more, relaxed, a little bit more calm out there, would let the game come naturally to him. I don't think any of us him to come out and, start shooting jumpers or to drop 35 points. But, just the regular Ben Simmons that we've seen over the course of the first two seasons would be, a great step in the right direction tonight.
And by the way, just to be, somewhat clear, I understand that the coach has a role in positioning guys to get open or not get open. I didn't have a problem with some of they were wide open, Michael.
Sure.
Mike Scott was sitting by himself all day, and you couldn't ask for him to be more open. They got him open, and the guy shoots 40%. He's a 41% three-point shooter. Don't I want him taking wide open threes?
Yeah, Mike, there was definitely Mike Scott was 1 for 8, in that game. Joel would normally, they're
those are the shots. Like Mike Scott 1 for 8. He's a 40% three-point shooter. He should be making 3 or 4 of those.
But then,
right, and that's you kind of, you would reference like the law of averages there. Like you wouldn't, you don't expect them. The Sixers as a team are, a little bit under 40, high 30%.
They average 11 threes made per game. They made 3 on Saturday.
Right.
You just wouldn't expect that to happen again. If they average 11 and they make 3 one game, that means in this next game they're going to have to make, exponentially more to, meet that average. Of course, that's not exactly how it works, but you would expect them to make more, moving forward, given the same shots that they had in game one.
MKB, what about, speaking of the shooting and, Mike Scott and Embiid 0 for 5, what about the zone the Nets are throwing at the Sixers?
Yeah, honestly, that's another great point. It seemed like it threw them off a little bit, as though they almost weren't prepared for it, which is kind of surprising because I think the Nets. I don't have it right in front of me, but I think they played some of the most zone out of any team in the league this year. Kind of dared the Sixers to take some shots, and obviously it paid off. They weren't making those shots. You would hope, as kind of what we were just talking back to with making some of those threes, if they're making the shots, it might force the Nets to change. But as it was in game one, the shots weren't falling, and, it ended up working out in the Nets' favor. In the short time that they've had since game one, I'm pretty sure that, Brett and the rest of Monty and the rest of the guys, prepared for that zone. So I think you would expect them to be a little bit more ready for it tonight. But I think that's a good point that not a lot of people mentioned, Ryan. That's, I think that was a decent factor in that game one win for Brooklyn.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain covers the NBA, covers the 76ers for 97.3 ESPN.com. So what about last year in the Boston series? They kind of waited to start TJ McConnell. Now, I'm not suggesting TJ, but they waited late to finally make a change. They waited till they were down 3-0. If they were going to say, you know what, we saw something or we should do something and we don't want to wait this time, is there anything that you would change if you were Brett Brown tonight and not wait until, God forbid, you lose game 2 to make some sort of change?
Yeah, Mike, I think I would start Mike Scott over JJ Redick. I think that would be my move. I think I would do it starting tonight.
Wow.
It doesn't mean Redick wouldn't see a ton of minutes. I would obviously he played 22 minutes in that first game. He would still see 22 minutes. But, having Mike in that first unit, not that he's, necessarily a lockdown defender. He's more mobile laterally. I think it would prevent Brooklyn from targeting JJ and some of these switches and getting him on. Every single time he was on Dinwiddie or Russell in that first game, it was an automatic basket. I was saying that to the guys in the section around me. You could see it coming from a mile away. They would target him, get the switch, and he would get beat to the basket and either give up a layup or help would come, and it would lead to, a backdoor cut or something like that. And it was just painfully obvious. And when he's not hitting his shots, he's a liability on the floor. I think he showed earlier in the season, he gave up that starting spot for Markelle, and he was fine coming off the bench. His numbers were, right on par. His shot was still there. I think he's a veteran that could, take that in stride. I don't think it would, mess his psyche up necessarily to say, hey, listen, we want to bring you off the bench. I just think that would be a big change. And then on a smaller scale, I wouldn't have Jonathan Simmons see the floor. I just got word since we've been on the radio that Ennis has been cleared tonight. I don't know, how healthy he is or how much he's going to be able to play. But that's the thing. I would give the minutes that Jonathan Simmons saw to obviously Ennis if he's good to go, and even Zaire Smith.
That's interesting. I mean, to me, I think JJ needs to stay in the starting lineup just for how important he is with spacing and how him and Embiid have that, that connection and chemistry together. But I wouldn't hate that adjustment. I like it. Do you anticipate any adjustments?
Not in the starting unit, Ryan. I think that, that's kind of, I think that would be a little bit out of left field for Brett and maybe even a little bit move of desperation. I mean, I do agree JJ being out there is important in general just for the spacing that he creates and the fact that the defense has to respect him. But, I just think that he's, so easy to target and get points on defensively, and putting Mike in, who's obviously physically, a much more imposing, larger defender and more athletic. I think it would just minimize some of those easy, layups or rim runs or fouls that they were able to get in that first game. But, I definitely don't expect that to happen. I do expect some changes to get made. This whole season, the Sixers really haven't had a solid rotation like they kind of did at the end of last year, where you kind of knew who was coming in when and for who. That just hasn't been something that the Sixers have had the luxury of having, and I think that kind of showed in that first game. Brett was kind of pulling guys out left and right. You didn't really know what he was going to do, so I think it would benefit him and the team for him to figure it out this game, obviously, see what he wants to do, and then kind of keep it like that moving forward to get some, a little bit of unity moving forward. I think that was another factor in that first game.
What's your keys to the game for the Sixers in the first quarter? Like, for the Sixers to get a strong start, what do you expect them to do coming out of the gates?
I think we'll see, obviously, so this is assuming that Joel plays, which is, we haven't got the official word, but I think we will. I think we'll see him. They'll try to establish him early and often. The first 4 minutes of that game, he drew 4 fouls on the Nets, all on shooting fouls, and he was, looked dominant early. And then very slowly they kind of got away from that. His conditioning had something to do with that. But while he's fresh, I think they'll go, to him heavy and often in the post to try to establish him down there. And I think Brett will try to do some things to try to get Ben some easy looks, whether that's putting the ball in Jimmy's hands and putting, Ben down in the post when Joel's on the bench, or, playing a little high-low with him and Joel. I think, obviously getting him and, Ben and Tobias, quite frankly, but Ben specifically, getting in some easy looks around the rim early on to kind of get him, get that confidence and that, emotion and energy on both ends of the floor going. Because Ben can be, I think to me, the most disappointing part of Ben's game 1 performance was the defensive end. Because, I think we all know that Ben has the potential to be a very, very solid defender. And he, at times, he shows it. But he didn't show it on Monday, and I think if he's getting some dunks, some easy baskets on the offensive end, players tend to pick it up a little on the defensive end. And if Ben's going defensively, getting steals, generating the fast break, getting guys open, open looks, the Sixers offense just looks so much better. So I think getting Ben going is really key to what they're going to do. And based off, all the comments that Brett's made since game one, I think that is something that they'll look to do early.
Would you consider sitting Embiid and saying, look, you're off Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. By Thursday, hopefully, or do you think this is just something that's going to linger no matter what, so just play him regardless?
It's tough, Mike. Now that he's played game one, I almost think you got to just go forward with it. If he had wanted to sit game one to get a little bit of extra rest, but from what I've been told at this point, it's pretty much up to Joel. This isn't like some of the other past situations where it's kind of been a collaborative process. Right now, the exact issue isn't known. I think there is some concern that it could be a longer term issue, but in the short term, I think it's a pain management situation. It's pretty much up to Joel on the day of the game whether or not he feels like he can, play through the pain enough to be productive for the team. He said after game one that the knee was bothering him and it was painful, but he kind of just fought through it. So it's going to be up to him, and I think as we all know, Joel wants to play. He wants to be out there. I thought it was Jimmy Butler said something after game one that I thought was interesting that kind of implied that, as much as they like to have Joel out there with them, they want him fully healthy, and him not being fully healthy, could kind of almost be detrimental to both him and the team if his conditioning's not there, if he's not able to give it his 100%. So I do think it's something that they should consider, giving him the night off, like you said, to give him a few extra days rest. But at the end of the day, as far as I know, this decision is pretty much up to Joel, and I don't think that he would, especially after the disappointing game one, I have a tough time thinking that he would be okay with sitting.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain, let me get your thoughts on, number one, you had Ben Simmons saying, I don't like to get booed. Essentially, just wasn't there in game number one. You had Amir on the bench with the cell phone with Joel. Joel says, he was checking on his kid. And, it just sounded like my dog ate my homework. You had just a team that just looked like they had never met each other. I get it. They had not played a whole heck of a lot, but where do you kind of hold Brett and the organization in terms of why that team seemed to be so disjointed on Saturday?
Yeah, it was like a perfect storm of disjointedness on Saturday, and it's unfortunate. I don't, in terms of the Amir situation, I don't hold Brett, accountable at all for that. It was actually, to me, it was, I don't know if ironic is the right word or frustrating, but for it to be Amir, the guy that was doing it when, he was brought in 2 years ago to be, specifically for this quote unquote veteran presence. He's the, Brett said he's the elder statesman in the room. He's the oldest guy on the team. For it to be him sitting there messing with his cell phone on the bench, I thought was, I guess ironic is the right word. But in general, obviously, I think Brett kind of takes some criticism for running a little bit loose. He's kind of loose with not like tight run ship. I think that kind of showed a little bit in game one, and the fact that, Amir was, done that on the sideline and happened to, get caught on the cameras and turned into a national story, allowed it to get played, kind of lumped into all the other things. If they had been winning that game, obviously, and he was looking at the phone, I don't think it would have turned into as big as a deal as it did. The fact that they were, getting thoroughly outplayed by an inferior team and they looked to be distracted by a cell phone. It was just, it was a bad look. I think it was definitely something that Brett didn't appreciate based off, his comments about it when he first found out talking to us after the game. But, in terms of that situation, that's something I think Amir should know better. But I think that we should expect to see a more tight-knit group tonight. I think they know, kind of what's at stake. They don't want to, quite frankly, I don't think they want to hear the boos again from the fan base tonight, because that's a story that's been, perpetuating now for 48 hours on a national level. People talking about the fans booing the team. It's obviously not something the team is, super proud of. So I think that everyone is pretty eager to go out there tonight and just kind of, rewrite the script of this series and start it over.
All right, we'll see game 2 tonight right here on 97.3 ESPN as the Sixers take on the Nets. And, the Nets shot the ball really well. We know the Sixers have a lot of problems on that pick and roll. Now, Brett indicated the other day that you will probably see less switching from them.
Yeah, that's one approach that he said. I think they've had obviously a lot of issues with the switching in the first game, which is pretty predictable considering how the regular season went. it gives me a little bit of concern to be, kind of tinkering with the defensive system, whether or not it's, the merits of the system are debatable. But the fact is that it's been, what they've been using for the majority of the season, and it's what they're, pretty much comfortable with. So I do agree that, if you're able against a team like Brooklyn to not rely on switches on every screen and kind of stay with, in front of your guys, the problem with the Sixers is they just don't necessarily have the personnel to, be able to stay in front of these quicker guards on Brooklyn. So I think it'll be interesting. I do think that's an approach that they will try. How well it works is yet to be seen.
All right. A lot on the line tonight. You go down 0-2. Michael Kaskey-Blomain, you tweeted this out. You go down 0-2. You think the series is over. Sixers, a big favorite tonight, 7.5 point favorite. And many times when the team that's favored in the series loses game one, they are almost perfect in this game two scenario. We'll see it all right here at 8 o'clock on 97.3 ESPN. Michael, I will see you up at the center shortly.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Ryan.